Mr Chair, thanks for the opportunity to speak in the committee stages of the Governor-General Bill. Labor has supported this bill because there's no doubt, as other previous Labor speakers have pointed out, the previous Labor government asked the Law Commission to look into funding arrangements for the Governor-General, which is the substance of Part 1 of this bill, and we're pleased that the Commission's findings are being implemented in full. Labor welcomes a discussion about New Zealand's constitutional arrangements, and a bill about one of the most important figures in our constitutional arrangements is a good opportunity for that, and it's good to start with focusing on streamlining the financial arrangements of the Governor-General. We've always been keen to hear people's views about the future of our constitution, which we've shown through our support for Keith Locke's Head of State referenda bill to Select Committee and the moves to encourage debate about the New Zealand flag. And I don't think anyone's in any doubt about my support for New Zealand having its own Head of State. And I'd also like to put on record that I had a great deal of sympathy for the SOP put forward by my colleague in the Greens, Keith Locke. I think we absolutely need to have a public debate about the length of term of the Governor-General and also the role of the Governor-General and how that might change. But I think that debate must occur in a select committee and other public forums where the public has adequate opportunities to put forward its views. Mr Chair, we've also shown our support for constitutional discussions, apart from our support for Part 1 of the bill about funding arrangements for the Governor-General, through our active participation at a recent constitutional conference in Wellington, where several present and past Labor members of Parliament talked freely about the importance and inevitability of constitutional change in New Zealand. And interestingly, the government's participation in that conference was fairly minimal, with only Simon Power restricting his views to MMP reform and not to the wider constitutional issues. Labor, however, was ably represented by Charles Chauvel, and we also heard from the former Deputy Prime Minister Michael Cullen, who laid out a clear roadmap for New Zealand becoming a republic, and he talked about the need...
Now, we're confining this debate to Part 1, and so if the members making examples, they must draw them into some portion of Part 1. This is not a general debate, Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Where he talked about the need to make a start on the law changes required so that we can get ready and be able to elect our own head of state. And while this bill at least introduces the concept of constitutional change, it doesn't exactly light one's fire, although it does deal with some important issues, in particular egalitarianism and equality, both of opportunity and responsibility, which have always been core Labor values, along with fairness. And certainly the removal of the Governor-General's tax exemption, which will be discussed in the next part, is an important symbol of the fundamental equality that New Zealand is built on and that we hold dear. The particular clauses that we're addressing in Part 1 of the bill, which clarify the definition of family in Clause 4, Clause 5, which sets out the salaries, Clauses 8 and 9, which talks about the annuity paid to the Governor-General after leaving office, and also an important clause, I thought, was around the recognition of the Governor-General's spouse if the Governor-General dies after ceasing to hold office. And I think that is actually a very important clause, because it actually values the role that the spouse of the Governor-General plays. We note, Mr Chair, that this bill promotes transparency and will also modernise the old-fashioned language that's found in the Governor-General parts of the Civil List Act, which will also be considered in Part 2. But of course, we welcome any discussion about any legislation based on transparency, modernity, openness and upholding ethical standards and principles as the cornerstone of democracy, because that's the kind of party that we are. In contrast to the government, which seems to have its modus operandi, a habit of saying one thing to one audience and something completely different to another. And I refer, Mr Speaker, to a comment made by my colleague Trevor Mallard during his speech on the second reading of this bill, where he said...
Dr Rajan Prasad.